Hello, we're going to talk about caulk guns today. Which is the best one for your next project, whether you're a pro or homeowner. The most popular caulk gun on the market is this dripless type. As you'll notice, there's no button on the end. You would insert your tube after you've cut your tip, and you would start caulking, and then when you're done and you release it, the caulk stops. It's a beautiful thing. Older style caulk guns, such as this one, have a button on them. And so once you would start caulking, the caulk would continue to come out the end until you hit the button. And no matter how long you've been caulking, you are gonna find a time where you set your caulk gun down and forget to hit the button and have a pile of caulk somewhere you didn't want it to be. So shy away from the ones with the button if you can, and always go towards the dripless kind. So let's talk about the anatomy of a caulk gun here for a minute. They're pretty simple. We got the handle here, and this is the lever that pushes the caulk through as you squeeze. Most caulk guns come with a needle, and so what the needle is for is once you have cut your tip, and we'll talk about that in a second, to the right angle and size that you want, then you would use the needle to insert and puncture the seal. Now, not all caulk has a seal on it. Some do, some don't. The other thing that this needle is handy for is if you've used a partial tube of caulk and then stopped, the caulk is going to dry in this tube, and say a week later you pick the tube up and want to use it again, you're going to need to insert the needle into the tube to puncture that nozzle again so that you can start using the caulk. So needles are very handy. We have a couple different, this is an ergonomic caulk gun, so it's designed so if you're caulking for a long period of time, there'll be less strain on your wrist and your hand and your fingers. And then this is a really cool looking space age caulk gun. I don't really know what's special about it, but boy, it does look cool. And so those are the basics of the caulk guns. And next we're going to talk about cutting the right angle of the tip for the project that you're caulking. All right, let's talk about cutting the tip. Really important component of the caulk job that you're about to do. The tip size, or the orifice, really important to what you're trying to fill. For an interior project, you probably need a smaller orifice. You don't want as much caulk to extrude out of the end of the caulk gun as you would potentially on an exterior, where you may have larger gaps to fill and would therefore need a larger tip size. We'll start with the interior tip size and then move to the exterior. So for interior exterior caulking, either one, you need a sharp utility knife, and hopefully you can put your caulk tube against something stiff when you make your cut at a 45-degree angle, and that gives you a smaller orifice for an interior caulk job. You could even make that smaller depending on what you're trying to caulk. So now we're going to do some caulking that would better simulate what exterior caulking would look like. So I'm going to use the same tube of caulk that we've already used, but I'm going to cut this tube of caulk again at a 45-degree angle. I'm going to increase the size of the hole that we're going to use because the exterior is going to be a little larger. We'll need a little more caulk flowing out of there to fill the gap. So let's see what this looks like. So next comes the secret weapon of caulking. And most people know to have a paint rag with them when they're doing a painting project. If you're caulking, you want to have a wet rag with you. Sometimes a bucket of water to rinse your rag out. But the rag is really important. Once you've laid that bead of caulk down, whether inside or out, you run your finger along that caulk, and that takes off any excess and smooths that line out so that you have a nice smooth finish between whatever two pieces of wood and drywall or wood and wood that you're caulking. Takes the excess off. So you're going to want to rinse this rag fairly often if you're doing a lot of caulking, because the caulk will start to build up and you'll start to get it on yourself, maybe on the things you're trying to take it off of. So always have the wet rag with you when you're caulking. Okay, we have our tip cut. Now we're going to load our caulk into our caulk gun. We're going to get that tight in there. When we start to caulk, we want to use nice even pressure. We don't want to squeeze too hard. That would just make a lot of caulk come out all at once, or too little, then we'd have gaps in our caulk line. And also remember the secret weapon of the damp rag. So we have a clean water here, damp rag. And so we're going to go ahead and start on this piece of trim here. Get that caulk started. Nice consistent pressure and consistent flow. And then we're going to go back with our damp rag and we're going to wipe out the excess. Sometimes when you get into the corners, your finger doesn't fit in there very well. So you want to wrap your damp rag around a utility knife or a 5-in-1 or a painter tool, and you just can get the corners and get that last little bit out so that corner is nice and even and doesn't have an excess buildup of caulk. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start caulking. I'm going to show you as I go. Ideally, we have consistent pressure and consistent speed, but also the angle of the tip against what you're caulking is important. You want that tip orifice to be flat at the 45-degree angle. If you were caulking and you didn't have it at the right angle, you can see how the caulk lays down differently. If I did it the other way, it gets too far in and doesn't fill the gap. So again, I'm going to pick back up here. You want consistent pressure and a consistent angle, and that'll give you a good result. And then again, we'll take our damp rag and we're going to wipe that down and take the excess off. And it's fairly clean except for a little gap here where we didn't have it at the correct angle, but you can always go back and fill that in, and then again just take your rag, go back across it, take that excess off. So if you're new to caulking, a couple of things you might encounter. You might find that as you start to caulk, you don't have consistent pressure, and your caulk may end up looking like this with gaps, or just it does not fill the crack evenly, and it's not smooth. But not to worry, whether you catch this when the caulk is dry after a day or so, or whether you catch it right away, you can always go back and fill those gaps in. And remember, just even consistent pressure will help take care of all those gaps and uneven spots. And another thing that you might encounter is if you've made a bad cut on your tip, that too can be rectified. You just need to go back, recut the tip at a 45-degree angle, and create the right look for the orifice you're trying to fill. Hey there, thanks for watching our video on caulking and caulk guns. We so hope you found this information helpful, and if you don't mind, we'd appreciate it if you'd hit the subscribe and like button. It helps other people in your situation find us and find our videos. Thanks again.